Welcome to Redefining ABCD. Alrighty, so hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Larger Than Us. Today, Sneha and I are going to be diving into internalized racism. This is a meaty topic, and especially in our community, there's a lot of the toxic behavior or the social interactions that happen or occur or pressured in our community kind of stems from this concept of internalized racism. So Sneha and I are going to kind of talk a little bit more about what it kind of means, like the definition of internalized racism is, and how it kind of affects the various spheres of our life. So like mental health, identity, social interactions, relationships, and yes, we're gonna get a little bit into the dating side of things. So it's gonna be exciting. We hope you stick with us till the end, and we hope you enjoy this conversation. But with that, let's start off with the first question, and obviously we have to start off here is how do you perceive internalized racism? I guess based on your experiences or what you've kind of seen in our community, what do you think it means to like the concept of internalized racism?
So, I think, I think in my head, I always defined internalized racism as sort of it's kind it's a form of shame. I feel like, but a shame specific to your race or culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like everyone, I think, has experienced shame in their life to various degrees. But I think internalized racism specifically is specific to your race, to your culture, to like almost feeling bad for being too Indian or being or attributing yourself too much towards one culture or the other.
Right,
I
right.
feel like that in my head is how I define internalized racism, and it's interesting because I think for me specifically, I didn't really hear the term itself until maybe like sophomore year of high school or not high school, sophomore year of college even. And I didn't really understand what that was until I really started like diving into it in my head and like trying to figure out like what that means to me. And I always like was like, oh, was I shameful of my culture? Was I shameful of that? And I feel like for me, I never really was, to be honest. Like I thought I was very proud of my Indian side, but there was also pressure from the people around me that did have sort of that were had that shame attached to themselves. So it was almost like I was like their internalized racism was being transferred or projected onto me, and then it was
Mm-hmm.
making me question like, oh shoot, like I like should I be scared to show this stuff off? Should I be like dialing it back a little bit? Like am I doing it too
Right.
much? Like, like
Yeah.
so I think in that way, like it's very interesting because I feel like my shame and insecurities and all that stuff come from things that are not based on my culture, but I understand that like that is something that is a motivator and can and is a huge impediment for people in our community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think my view of internalized racism is really similar to yours. Like you said, is the shame or shaming of or gaslighting specific point of views, and I think it kind of like relates to heightening or enforcing stereotypes. As much as everybody's like we should break away from them, we should be different. The internalized racism like it shows the other way. Like people, the same people who are like we need to be different, we need to break the stigma. A few of them do enforce some of the stereotypes. I guess I think one of the biggest things that I kind of see with that is like just pursuing a notional career that's kind of known in our community. So much gaslighting and I don't know why, but it's just so much into that. And like for example, being an engineer, I've kind of gotten like the role. Oh, you're going to be an engineer, but people don't realize of color in STEM is still very little. Yes, we see many of women in our community, maybe many people in our community, like pursuing being a doctor or like engineer. But in the broader perspective of things, we're still very much minority in like the bigger playing fields and ballparks. So there's no reason to shame someone to going into those routes just because it was an enforced stereotype when it was our parents' age. So I think those things like that. Is very much examples of internalized racism. But on the flip side, I think like the gaslighting of like the opposite of like the non-stereotypical things, like not maybe having strict parents, people kind of like gaslighting you on like, oh, you should be lucky. Like, yes, we might not have strict parents, but there's also other problems and experiences that come with that. And just because they're not exactly like the problems you're dealing with, it doesn't mean that they're smaller problems or they're not anything like too serious. So I think it's like
Right.
that's like the two ends of the spectrum in terms of like the bigger things that I kind of noticed based on my experiences. But I'll be honest, I feel like when I was younger, I might have done some things that are can be considered internalized racism. I think the biggest thing I think in high school for me was like the self-deprecating jokes. I was a
Yes.
big person in
Hmm.
doing that, and it was like not just like self-deprecating and also in culture too, like
Hmm.
and then again
Hmm.
Indian cultures. And I think that's like seen in media, and you think that it's cool to do that. Like personally, I like thought that that was like the thing to do if you wanted to fit in and like comedic humor and whatever. It was like self-deprecating
Yeah.
jokes, and that's what I did because I just saw that and like how it was kind of like presented. And so I think that like that for personally for me, I think that is like what I've done that I've seen, but like I've kind of learned from it. Like I was like, wow, I was like this in high school. I shouldn't have probably done that, but yeah.
Well, I mean, okay, yeah, maybe I should preface. I don't say that I didn't have any internalized racism. I just like I like did it didn't root like most of my problems aren't rooted in that. Like there I have other issues that have nothing to do with this concept. But yeah, no, I definitely am a I do that as well where I'm and it might not even be me making the self-deprecating joke. It might be someone else making a
Mm-hmm.
self-deprecating joke in regards to culture or race, and I still laugh. I still laugh even if I think it's like maybe we shouldn't be laughing. Like I
Right.
don't know, like, and it's weird too because like I think I have issues with self-deprecating jokes just all across the board. Nothing to do with the internalized racism, nothing to do with the cultural thing. But I think even in high school and stuff that was a huge part. I think also like being scared to like bring Indian food, being scared to bring Indian food
Mm.
to school, even though that we were surrounded by other Indian people, it was still
Right.
very stigmatized and very weird to be like, oh, they're bringing chapati here, wow, what a thought. Like it's a toxic sort of energy. Like, why can't we just let them be? Like, calm down. Like, can we just bring what we like to eat, like,
Yeah, yeah.
please.
People always assume like if you grew up in a very Indian, like an Asian environment, you most probably
Hmm.
didn't have to deal with like a lot of the identity issues that like people kind of stereotype with Indian American or South Asian
Hmm.
American. But surprisingly, we did. Like, yeah, like you said, shame in bringing your own like cultural background. Food was still a thing, even though majority of us were Indian. They would
Yeah,
look at you
yeah.
weirdly if you brought chapati and dal or like rice or sadam, and it's like it's just
It
ironic. I don't know
it's
why.
like it's like why are we doing this, guys? This is our culture. We should be proud of it. Why are we not uplifting this kind of stuff? Showing it off a little bit. Like, I don't know. Like, we should have a little pride towards it. No, and it's interesting because so my sister, what, she's 13, 9 years younger than me. I wonder all the time if that still exists with with their, I don't want to say like generation because she's still in the same generation, but like, like in that set of people, like, is that stuff still happening now? Because I mean, in Shreya's group, like, there's so many more Indian people, so many more Indian groups. There's a variety of like different personalities that are coming out, and I do see that and I appreciate that because I think when we were there was like really only one big group, and if you didn't fit into that group, you kind of just drifted away and drifted apart. But for her, like, there's a lot of different types of Indian groups that are interested in different things, and you can pick and choose what you want. If if that's what you're going. So I'm wondering if that internalized racism still like at least that level of internalized racism still carries through, or if there is a more appreciation and a more like uh a pride with that now. So I don't know. It's very interesting. I want I'm almost curious to like see, if that's changed at all.
Yeah, that is an interesting that's an interesting point because nowadays people are more hyper aware of like these types of topics nowadays a
Yeah,
little bit more than when we were kind of like in high school or growing up. So yeah, there might be like positive things. Like maybe they're not kind of experiencing what we've experienced maybe, but there might be different
hopefully.
problems like you said. Let's hope they're
Yeah.
not. Like hopefully we've evolved from like what the 10 years or however long high school was
Yeah,
ago.
yeah. We were the shield. We were the shield, and now they're getting better, right? Like hopefully
Right.
that's where we're going. I don't
Yeah,
know.
but kind of going back to like what I think like internalized racism being like enforcing stereotypes. I kind of see that like when you mentioned your sibling, I was thinking about Sham, and
Hmm.
um I think for him, like what I've noticed is the stereotype of being Indian was like something that was just like he didn't want to be like associated with that stereotype because there comes with a lot of judgment from different types of people,
Hmm.
of course, from that stereotype. And I think that's maybe I feel like that still hasn't changed. I feel like when people say I'm South Asian, I'm Indian, there's an image, like there's an unconscious bias in you that like to be like putting these like types of reserves or judgments, which I think that kind of like instigates or propels
Hmm.
other like problems that kind of lead towards internalized racism.
No, I agree, and I guess that kind of leads really nicely into our next question, which was where do you think the concept of internalized racism stems from? Like, why does it happen? Like, is there like a certain origin story for how this happened, or is it just I don't know, like where do you think this concept comes from, or is perpetuated by?
I think I was like this made me ponder a little bit. I was just like, where does it all come from? Because and like you kind of like trace it back. Like you think of like the pressure, the jealousy, the competitive environment that comes with our culture, but then also
Hmm.
the stereotypes that comes with just basic human nature to like categorize human beings into specific boxes. And I think that like really like goes if you trace it all the way back. I think in my opinion it's the model minority myth that kind of was
Hmm.
instigated in this country when like immigration was a really big thing for South Asians into the US. Just because the way people like outside of our community were crafted to believe all Asian people, all South Asian people are going to be like this type of like identity. I feel like
Hmm.
that's where it started the internalized racism because like what we're trying to push for in our podcast, our diaspora is very diverse. So kind of grouping everybody to be like, oh, there's all these people who will provide white collar jobs. They'll be very smart. They'll be able to push or break the boundaries of the U.S. history in all areas putting all these pressures, I feel like kind of enforced, like made everybody within the community themselves try to enforce it themselves. Um,
Right.
like the reputation that comes with being Asian. Like I definitely know that when I was in high school, the self-deprecating jokes that I had give to myself was, "I'm so dumb and math. I'm like I'm not capable of being smart." Was a lot of the self-deprecating jokes that I made because it was so enforced that every South Asian and Asian in general was smart, high achieving and stuff like that. So I think really that was the start of it. Like that pressure that was given in our culture, but also in like the US, like the American side of like what it means to be Asian to like white people kind of like snowballed into something bigger that's still being like affecting us even though we're not immigrants, we're children of immigrants.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think like the level of intelligence, like I think I think intelligence is like the norm. Like you have to have a certain level, and it's not like it's got to be book smart. You got to have the grades. You got to have the
Right.
numbers to back it up. That's what's like. Oh, okay, cool, great. Like, are we sure though? Can we move away from this, please? Like for example, like okay, like we always say that like our high school was very high pressure, high, in they pushed us a lot and all that stuff. But like for example, this is how bad it was, right? Like I think it was a norm at a certain point that you had to be in honors in order for you to be intelligent or deemed intelligent within the
Yeah.
community. If you were not in the honors community of taking all the honors classes, you were almost immediately kind of shunned from the Indian group. Like even if you wanted to hang out with them outside of school or something, like it's just like through the circumstance that we're in, we can't even hang out with each other because every Indian is taking honors. And if you don't, it's like, whoa, are you Indian? Are you sure? Like
Right.
it's a problem. It's a problem. And again, going back to my sister's age, I apparently this aspect has gotten worse from what I've heard. Apparently the because our standard was honors, right? The standard now is double honors. You have
What
to
the
be doing
frick?
two years
What?
2 years above you is what is normal now.
What the heck?
So yeah, it's only upping the game. It's only getting
Yeah.
oh, it's like the pressure is getting heavier.
Yeah.
But it's getting heavier, but it's also like diluting a little bit. It's very confusing. It's happening all at once. So you're like, okay. Are we doing worse? Are we doing better? I don't know. So yeah, just to paint a picture of how high functioning we were told to be, and
Hmm.
having that pressure at in high school, and also having to balance like having a life or being an individual, like that was not really put as a forefront. We were just sort of expected to all meld into this high functioning, intelligent, like box. And I think in that, like, it's funny because we were put in that box, but we were also like, oh, but we don't want to be Indian. We don't want like we like I'm
Exactly.
confused that like like why are we making this box more uncomfortable?
It's like getting tighter and
Like
tighter. Like,
yeah, like why are we intentionally making this more uncomfortable for us? Like if I wish we'd held on to that pride, but also had that high, like I wish that was the only thing we had to deal with, but now we got two sides coming in at once. And it's like it's a lot, and it's very weird. It is very ironic that that happened. I was also thinking like, it's also the idea of like I think it's just human nature to want to fit in,
hmm,
and you want to
yeah,
fit in, and
definitely.
you want to be easily understood by the people around you. You don't want to have to explain your personality. You don't want to have to
Exactly.
do that. And I think in high school with those stereotypes, the internalized racism, or not the model minority stuff coming at you, the judgment, you want to fit in. You want to feel like, oh, I fit into this happy place. Like this is comfortable.
I
This
am who
is
I
what
am
I
supposed to
know.
be.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Someone is telling me this is what I need to do, and this is comfortable, and I'm okay with this.
Hmm.
Um, and then leaving high school and realizing, oh shoot, like I am actually the minority now. Shoot, what do I do now? Like I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that, but yes, the concept of internalized, I think it stems from model minority, but also the want to and need to want to fit in. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
so
kind of going back to that like pressure that you're talking about of fitting into that stereotype where you're saying it's like actually now intensified from
mhm.
what your sister is having to go through in like middle school and high school. I was like thinking about that too. Like for me, I like some people who only know me beyond college will be very surprised to hear this, but I actually was not. I like growing up, I was very bad at school, in my opinion. Because well, see, this is when I say this is because I was not in honors math till like junior year of high school, and people were already in honors math in perspective of how competitive our environment was. um, like maybe sixth grade, seventh grade, like girls were going,
Mhm.
like people
Mhm.
were going in intermediate school, were going to middle school in the morning to take math classes and then come back to their classes. And like, that's how intense, like, it was an expectation that you were in middle school before you were actually in middle school. So I felt very dumb. And I think what pressured it more was my parents, not to like it's just like for them it's something new too. I'm the first child, so I totally understand where they came from, but then they started slowly pressuring me, like every day on the weekend I had to do like 4 hours of math, and I had to do I had to do all these like very like
Come
strict
on.
things, Kumon and Khan Academy, IXL, all these types of things, because they thought I was falling behind and that was gonna like hinder my success. And mind that be, I was in like sixth or seventh grade doing regular math that middle schoolers should be doing. I wasn't behind. I mean, it's okay if you're behind, but it was just like I was
You were
average. It's
just
like,
you were going, yeah, you were going at a pretty steady place. You were fine. You're good.
yeah, and every time my parents would like make me do a long period of like math or like kid, you need to be better, it always made me doubt myself. I was like, am I not normal because I'm average or I'm like not doing
Right.
well in something? And so it always made me question myself and be like, am I really capable of doing things, because I never really fit in. And I feel like that pressure, that my parents pressure, came from how other people are going to perceive when they, because all those other people are going to be like, my daughter's in triple
Mhm.
honors. My daughter's in honors, and she's doing math Olympics on her free time. And I don't know if she really wants to, but her parents are forcing her and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And so that, I think that pressure got to them, and they were like, "All right, Kirti, now you need to like chug and go because you're falling behind." And that, I feel like that also kind of contributes like to internalized racism, that pressure to fit in, like you said, into this really tight box that's now becoming very much more tighter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I agree. Like the auntie uncle like comments inside, like the gossiping and like all this stuff. Like it's still very much part of like even if it's just talk, it still does have effects. It still has long-term effects and can trickle into like how a kid, like it still trickles into other people's lives. And I think that's where the whole like transference idea, like, and that's why the bar keeps getting raised and raised and raised and raised, because all these
Mhm.
people are just being like, oh, my kid's doing this, my kid's doing that, what are you like, da, 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 da. It's like, why can't we all just be happy together? Like, look at what we're all accomplishing. We're so good for each other. Like, it's great. Like, I mean, I wish idealistically, like, I wish everyone would just be happy for what we're all doing. Like, we're all
Mhm.
doing really great in our lives, guys. Like, we're good. Like, we're making it, getting there. We're working on ourselves. We're getting there. We should be proud of that, not shitting on each other. But
Right.
again, I live in a very idealistic world in my head, so it really sucks when the reality of the world hits it, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay,
The world
cool.
sucks sometimes, yeah.
The world sucks, but it's fine.
But yeah,
Um,
no, sorry, what was I saying? I was gonna say
I
something,
don't know.
sorry. Sorry, I don't know why I asked you. Like you would know what's in my head. But
Kirti, I think we're at a point where we could read each other's minds. Don't even like at this point,
true.
like.
I know, I've known you for so long. Yeah, that's so true. What were we talking about?
I don't know. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Moving on.
Okay.
How do you how do you see internalized racism affecting your pride and your identity? We kind of touched on this a little bit, but specifically, with your home life, with your clothes and traditions, even with like mental health issues or pre-existing stuff, how do you think that internalized racism is affecting those aspects?
Also side notes. Now I think we skipped a question, but I'll combine it with this one.
We did. Wait,
Yeah,
did
the
we
long.
skip long-term effects?
Yeah,
Oh
that's okay.
shit.
That's okay.
Wait,
That's
wait,
okay.
wait, wait. We can go back. We can go back. I'm
Okay.
down. We can cut this. We can cut it.
Okay. Yeah, it's gonna come in the video though. Oh well.
That's okay.
Guys,
That's
it's
okay.
okay. We
Well,
mess
I
up.
mean, hey, we could cut that out. I mean, whatever. It's fine. Uncut, except when we really mess up.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anyways, we're gonna backtrack a little bit. I don't even know how to continue this.
That's okay.
Anyways.
Just next question. Speaking
Okay.
of,
So, in terms of the effects of internalized racism, what do you think is like the long term impact of kind of, because we kind of spoke about it in terms of how it kind of affected us in the past, like in the pressure and stuff like that. So how do you think that kind of impacts you to like who you are now? As philosophical that kind of sounds.
Um, I think that in terms of like long term effects, I think the biggest one is like I still feel the need to like hide certain parts of like my Indian side, or like I feel the need to like ease people in because I know sometimes it's like a lot to handle, or like just depending on who I'm talking to or who, and this might not be specific to like people that are also Indian. It could just be like anyone like outside of the Indian community. Like I just know like I have a filter on me that's like, okay, I can't tell you about XYZ, or I can't do certain things because I know that you're not going to get it, and it's going to involve an explanation that I just am too tired to give you right now.
Mhm.
Like I don't want like, okay, for example, like I remember in college once there was, I don't even know what we were talking about, but it was with some studio friends, and I remember there I made a joke about like how I was like, it was like something about like in like when I was eating Indian food and I was sitting cross-legged and I'm like eating with my hands rice or whatever, and I like did the whole like movement, like I was like it was a whole thing. It was part of a joke or whatever, but it didn't land at all because everyone was like, "What are you talking about? What do you mean you eat rice with your hands?" And I'm like, "Oh fuck, oh shoot, like oh no," and maybe I shouldn't have mentioned that because now I have to do a whole explanation of everything and blah blah blah. And I don't know how much that's internalized racism and more just like the state of things. And I just need to do that and remember that I need to do that. But like ever since then, like there were certain aspect, like certain things that I felt like I needed to hide, like oh, like the fact that I eat curry or like Indian food or like make Indian food. When I, oh, this happens a lot when I so I buy basmati rice, or no, sona masuri rice from Amazon
Yes.
Prime. Okay, and it
Oh,
comes in
Prime
the
has
bag.
that?
Amazon Prime does have sona. Fun fact: Amazon Prime has sona
Damn.
masuri rice that comes in the packet, and I don't have to go. Like I don't have to go like to an Indian store and like heave it back home.
A home
Because
bag,
I
yeah.
It's great. Yeah, that's like too much effort. I have no muscle strength. That's not going to work. So I just order it. But
Sorry.
sometimes I'll pull this bag. No, 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 it's okay. Sometimes I bring this bag out when I'm like making my rice in the kitchen, and I've had roommates in the past that are just like, "Huh, what is that?" I'm like, "It's rice," and they're like, "Oh." It's because they've only seen rice from like Kroger and stuff, you know. Like they don't know that it comes in this giant pack with like the Indian whatever. So I mean, certain things like that. Like there's a point where I was scared to like bring that out. I'd be like, oh, like I have to test run it with this new roommate. Like how are you gonna feel about this? Like what are you gonna do? What's your reaction? And I don't know if that's internalized racism again, but again, examples of just like things that are still affecting me now, and I have to like train myself and be like, no, like this is part of who I am. I should just do it. Like, what are they gonna like? What they're gonna say a comment and it's gonna affect me? No, 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 no. I just gotta make rice. I'm just gonna go into the kitchen, make rice, and be done. There we go. I don't know.
No, I feel that. I 100% feel that. And I think that is, I think it's the effect of internalized racism, and partially because it is
Mm-hmm.
pressure of wanting
Yeah.
to, of what we kind of talked about in the past. But I totally get you. I also do that in new situations. Like it takes me like maybe a month till I actually start buying like groceries to make Indian
Mm-hmm.
food and stuff like
Right.
that, or like test the waters in terms of like how like what to do at home and stuff like that. But no, I totally get that. Um, I think personally for me, the impacts I feel like is just like self doubt. Like
Mm-hmm.
I have a tendency of not. I don't like sharing things about myself, as weird as that sounds, because a lot of people think of me as like an extroverted person who's very social. Like, yes, I'm very social. I can have a really good conversation with someone, but like I think if I reflect back to the types of conversations I have with someone when I first meet them, it's never really about myself. It's either like just conversations that's going on in the world or about them, and I just want to get to know them more or learn about their like viewpoints more. I don't know why. I just hate sharing about myself because I think that is like it's a factor of I guess that internalized racism or that pressure that of that constant need of like you're not being the right like you're not being South Asian. Like you're not good enough to be South Asian. That pressure being like what we had to experience through when we were younger. Because I always like if I share something about myself, I'm so scared someone's going to be like judgmental about it or they're going to shame me about oh you do this like wow you still don't know about this like this is
Yeah.
classic pop culture references and I'm like yeah I don't know don't judge
I'm
me
sorry. Yeah.
but but yeah, I think those are kind of like the long term impacts, and personally for me that I've kind of felt that has been a big play because it's weird because like I've never been like that mainstream South Asian person that you see those images very brightly on social media, like what it means to be South Asian, quote unquote, like the everything that's propelled I think that what's fueled by internalized racism, those type of images of what it means to be South Asian, you see that all over South like social media. And I feel like I'm not like that. And so I feel like I'm going to be constantly judged. And I think just constantly thinking about that is what is that effect of that. But I mean, at the same time, there's also things that like I've learned from the pressure, and I'm sure you have too.
Mm-hmm.
I think just like being more like tolerant with yourself or just like not caring about the small things, like if someone does make like a comment or is judging you, I don't really take it as much anymore as I would in the past, and I think that's because like you kind of go through those hard obstacles when you're younger. But I
Mm-hmm.
think in a way that I guess I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's also another effect that I feel like I've gotten from the experiences of the past.
Right. A thicker skin, I feel like you're more
Mm-hmm.
immune to those comments now. You're just like, okay, well, okay, bye.
Yeah.
Thanks for your input in my life. We're done now. Okay, moving on.
Right.
Which I think it is in a very cynical sort of sense. It is good because what is it? The whole what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I don't know. I mean, like I see issues with that statement because it's like, why would you? It's so sad that you need to be put through that in order to but
Grow.
whatever.
But yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
I get where you're coming from. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it's not that great. Long term effects. I mean, yeah. I think other things like also like how it affects the way I communicate and um I don't know where I was going with this. I don't know where I was going. Oh, there. I mean, like, yeah, like you said, like the pop references. That's where I was going. The pop references that you're mentioning. There's certain people, especially there's certain people that take a lot of pride in like old rock or like things that their parents showed them, like
Hmm.
90s style music. I'm like, okay, you know what the 90s style music I listen to? I listen to like Indian Tamil music, okay? It's not
Right.
like what like I know like Vijay music from the 90s. Like what do you want from me? I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I'm not hitting your standards, but there's certain like exact like music industry specifically. Like I always like don't like sharing my music taste because my music taste is very much like the last like 5 6 years, and anything before that it just I have no knowledge of, like a very little knowledge of. So I that's something some other thing another effect that I was kind of thinking about because I don't know. Like my hobbies and interests are very much rooted in the last 5 years as opposed to instilled in me from birth or like from my parents' knowledge. Because my parents'
Right.
hobbies were are yeah, my parents' hobbies are also being unfolded and figured out right now, right? Like they're themselves are still trying to figure out what they like, what they don't like, that kind of stuff. It's not something that like it's not like a hobby or interest that was passed down from generations ago. It's like no, no, no. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It's just my knowledge of American culture starts very very like late. So
Yeah,
sorry.
same with me too. Yeah, as I thinking about it, my parents, it's what they've perceived America as, is what I
Hmm.
know about American culture growing up. So I totally get that. Yeah.
Yeah, and now I'm having to learn. Like I didn't realize how big skiing was in Ohio. Like God,
Oh my
why does
gosh,
everyone
yeah.
know how to ski? I don't understand.
Or
Where
ice
was this
skate.
boat? Yeah, yeah. What the hell is this? Like ice skating? Me? What? Yo, I don't know. I mean, like, I'm happy to learn now, but it's the people that shame me for not knowing it before. I'm like, okay, I don't have time for you. Like, please, don't do that. I'm
Have you
okay. Like,
ever have?
I'm
Oh,
trying.
sorry, sorry.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Out of curiosity, have you ever gotten a comment when like someone has like when you don't know something about like American references, and then have they like, "Are you sure you're American? Like you're American, you should know this." Have you ever gotten
Oh,
that?
I know. I haven't gotten that strictly, but I know they're thinking it. It's like that judgy sort of attitude. I'm like, yo, y'all, don't even come at me. Don't do it.
That
Don't do it.
comment stresses me out so much. I don't know
It's
why.
It's so bad. It's like, okay, like I'm already like because my brain immediately goes to like, shoot, I'm not Indian enough. I'm also not American enough. Where do I go?
I'm an
Where am I
alien.
going? Yeah,
Like,
apparently I'm just an alien from another world. That's okay.
and then
Um
you're getting called out on it, which is like even worse. But
yeah,
yeah.
well, it's worse when you're called out in front of a lot of people. I found
Oh
this
yeah.
out apparently. Like apparently I'm very easy to make fun of in like group settings. Like I just say
People tell
random
me that
shit.
too.
They're like, why don't you just stand up for yourself? I'm like, for what? For what purpose? Like, y'all are having a good time making fun of me, I guess. So I don't. It's like I don't know what to say. Like, what do you want? I don't know. My reaction to the because you can tell in certain groups like it's just fun and like they just but there's other groups where you can tell they're doing it to strictly like get at you, and I'm like, I'm
Right.
not here for that. Like, I'm okay. Can you not? Like my reaction to that is not to stand up for myself because I know like whatever I do, you're not going to change your mind on your opinion of me. My In that situation, I'm just like I'm going to walk away because I don't have time for you. I don't like I don't know. I don't know.
No, I get that. Like in the bigger picture of things, like now I'm looking at it, like yeah, those like you just kind of just let it go because they're like, you're right. Like why waste energy on something that's like you can't control?
Yeah, yeah. You got to just evaluate, pick and choose your battles. What was it? The Hassan Minaj is like you have a certain amount of cards and you can only play them a certain point. Like that it's
Oh
kind of
yeah, yeah,
true.
that analogy.
Kind of
Yeah, that,
true. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Like you gotta play them right, Like is this the hill you're gonna die on? I don't know. Maybe it
Mhm.
is, maybe it's not. You gotta figure it out. Um anyways, moving back to internalized racism after all of that. Um how do you see internalized racism affecting your pride and your identity, in terms of your home life, clothes, traditions, food even, or mental health? Um I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue from the previous question, like the long term effects, because there are a lot of different effects that kind of fall into different spheres of your life.
Mhm.
I think in terms of identity, like the social life, like I kind of said before, I was like kind of scared to share, or like it leads to not wanting to, like, not being able to open up, or have like those deeper relationships that I hope to have in the future. Just because, like, for me personally, when I make friends, I like to have really deep conversations with my friends. It's like small talk is really hard for me. So the initial phase of meeting someone is very stressful for me. So I think in that sense, that's kind of like where I kind of see like that shame kind of affecting me. I think in
Mhm.
home life, I'm sure people can also relate, like just being able to live comfortably, like we kind of talked about before, and just being able to like be comfortable and like being able to share things that are different about you that are different to others. And then kind of in the mental health side of things, I think it's just that fear, like shame turns into fear, and then that fear turns into self doubt, that turns into questioning, and then regret because you've doubted yourself all this long time. So of course it like leads to decisions that you might regret, and just losing yourself a little bit slowly. So I think like that is like what the effects is like in terms of mental health beyond identity, or like it's kind of like a snowball that's becoming bigger and bigger, and you kind of slowly can't just like you can't speak for yourself or stand up for yourself, like kind of what we talked about before. And I think it's
Mhm.
just the concept of internalized racism has, it's like a trigger for a lot of toxic and negative energy that, like, the people who kind of instigate those things, I feel like it's just constant negative energy. So I think that's what kind of is the effects of that in terms of mental health.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think we touched on it a little bit before as well. But again, that idea of like, am I American enough? Am I Indian enough? Like everyone is kind of going through these kind of things, like as just naturally as a hyphenated identity. And I think
Mhm.
internalized racism is kind of taking it for a spin almost. It's like on steroids. Like you're
Yeah.
like, it's like your brain is going back and forth and back and forth, and then you just get confused and you don't know really what to do. Um, in terms of like home life specifically, like I know back at home, like when I was living with my parents, like I had very contradicting information coming at me, right? And I don't do well with contradictions in my life just in general. I like consistency. I like to be comfortable, is what I've noticed. But aside from that, I think when I was living with my parents were really good about like uplifting Indian culture and like being like not forcing it, but being like, okay, like we're gonna get you interested in some Indian shows. We're gonna get you interested in some Indian movies. We're gonna and it's gonna happen naturally. You can have opinions about them, you know, you don't have to like it. You don't have to
Mhm.
like this movie, you don't have to like it. But if you do, that's great too. And I think because they allow me to do that, I was very proud of the Indian side of me. But then I'd go back to school and have like the opposite coming at me, like, oh, why do you care so much? Why do you like this? Like what do you mean, like, you know? And it's like it's very confusing having both of those coming at you at once because you never know which one to pick or choose. And I think
Yeah.
in terms of my home life, that's how that affected it because I just could never choose. And I always felt like it just felt like whatever I did, it wasn't going to be enough. Whatever I did,
Mhm.
like I could be the most Indian person I know. I could know all the references. I could do all, like, you know, I could be like super immersed in this culture and I'd still get shit for it. Or I could be super immersed in my American side and not know anything about my Indian culture and I would still be shit on for it, you know? Like there was no place where I felt like I was comfortable doing that. And I think coming out of like that situation and being able to step away from it, I've now been able to come up with a happy medium between the two and be happy where I'm at. And I think that's how I've been able to I guess how that specifically has affected me since then. In terms of like clothes and traditions, I was always really bad about dressing up, and in my head, I think Indian clothes means dressing up. so, so I don't know. Like in terms of clothes and traditions, like I will dress up for sure, 100% when I go to an Indian function. That's always been the case. Like I have to, you know, it's like can't not. There are certain like functions that I got invited to, like Diwali, like celebrations and stuff
Mhm.
on campus, on UC campus. I got invited to, and I was like, which one do I do? You know, like, am I doing the Indian outfit? Am I doing the that? Again, I don't think that's internalized racism as opposed to just confused. Like, what do I do? What does the situation call for? I think I
Right.
did end up wearing American clothes actually, which is very interesting choice. But okay, I don't know. And like mental health, like obviously there's like the idea, like I'm always constantly feeling like I have to hide that part of myself, or like or like ease people in. And I
Hmm.
am constantly thinking about that, especially if you're not from the Indian community. I'm like, okay, at what point in our friendship, what relation, whatever, am I telling you certain things? Because
Right.
you know certain things. But I think it's weird though, because I think very recently, I've just learned to like throw people in, and that's usually how I figure out if I want to hang out with you or not. Your reaction to this question. I'll
Hmm.
make an Indian reference and see if that's how they react, then that's how they react, and then I can move on.
Hmm.
um so I don't know if that answered the question. Did I
I feel like it did.
don't know.
I mean, like
Very
I understand.
roundabout way.
I understand where you're coming from though with the Indian clothes dress thing, because like a lot of our stuff is very elaborate, especially for women, and
Hmm.
I think that's another conversation for another day because that revolves around gender roles, society's
Yeah.
expectations of how women should look, and throw that for another day. But anyways, in terms of
Hmm.
like the mental health, I think I resonate with you in that. I feel like both of us are like hard on ourselves in general because we want to make sure we are our best version of ourselves, and then this kind of stirs the pot even more to be even more harder on yourself. And I think what I like similar, I have felt similar like thoughts and stuff like similar to you. But I think what nowadays what I've thought about is stepping back and seeing like, is this worth being hard on yourself for?
Yeah.
And seeing if it's really worth kind of those analytical thoughts that run in our head. 'Cause I feel like we're both very much thinkers as well. Like I'm
Oh yeah.
constantly thinking, like we're just constantly thinking about ourselves and how we kind of carry ourselves. So I think there's a lot of factors, and I just think maybe internalized racism is just kind of like that adrenaline shot that just kind of like
Yeah.
heightens everything else because
Yeah.
life
It's like
tends to
how
be like that.
no, right. Like constantly thinking about like how do I affect other people? Like am I being the best version I can for them? Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
really like, like how can I be the best version so that they feel comfortable? Like that I
Exactly.
don't know. I don't know.
I feel
Like
like we both we think about the other person way too much. And I've kind of noticed. I feel like I'm overly empathetic because I'm always trying to
mhm,
make sure the other person is okay or the other person is being feeling like they're hurt. But I'm like, what about myself? Because oftentimes I don't feel the same way, and so I
yeah.
think yeah, it's just hard because to be a good person, as strange as that sounds, because people always
At
tell
what
you
cost? At what cost do you sacrifice yourself and your own opinions? At what cost? At what cost
exactly.
are you going to sacrifice that in order to appease the people around you? I don't know. I don't have the answer because I also suck at this. So here we are.
Yeah, and
um,
it's like, can you really have a good relationship with someone if you're always constantly self-sacrificing your needs before
mhm.
others? Or like, I know it's a form of love, but like, still, like,
What a lovely segue into our next question, Kirti.
oh, that's right. Now we get to talk about the exciting stuff. Okay.
Oh.
Oh, speaking of love, how do you
Uh-huh.
see internalized racism affecting the dating scene? I know we both had a lot to talk about the dating world in this aspect.
Uh, well, as someone who rarely talks about her dating life, because
I feel
it's
that.
mostly like 95% non-existent, at least in my head. But we'll see. Maybe I don't know. I'm not a cynic, I promise. I don't know. Internalized racism affecting the dating scene. I think again, I'm very scared to share with someone that I really like about the things that I do in terms of my cultural whatever. For example, I went on a first date like 3 or 4. This has happened. Okay, I'll compare 2 dates. How about that? First
Okay.
date that I went to in New York. It was very sweet. He was very sweet. Whatever. I mentioned the podcast, and I mentioned like, oh, I do this. I have a podcast about cultural identity and like hyphenated identities and like we talk to people and all that stuff. And I was getting very excited about it as I do, and his reaction was just like oh cool, and then he moved on, and I was like, oh, okay,
Oh.
cool, great. Yeah, I was very sad. Skip to maybe a month and a half later, I was going on another first date with another guy, and he just kept going on and on and on, and he like lecturing me about, because I did the same thing, and he was lecturing me about my own culture and lecturing me about my, and I was like, oh my god, I'm
What the
getting
heck?
whiplash. I'm getting whiplash. Like what? Like it's just like the exact opposite of what I like. Both situations felt very uncomfortable in. So now I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, I can't tell you about the podcast until episode, not episode, until date 2 or 3 at
These
least.
could be episodes. Like,
Yeah, right. Like if this was a sitcom, if my life was a sitcom, each date would be an episode. Um, so yeah, like I don't know, like again trying to figure out, it's like a testing center of like, oh, when should I tell someone about my cultural identity and show them how like Indian I am, like how when at what point should I be able to do this. It's still a question for me and I have no idea how to answer that. And I think ideally, again, this is my idealistic part of my brain, ideally the person wouldn't care, but they would just be appreciative and uplifting about it.
yeah.
But I don't know. I have yet to meet someone like that, so I don't know.
No, I feel that. I feel that. I think I was thinking about what you were saying about how like you're kind of scared to share. I feel like this is an epiphany that came in my head. I feel like it's just like the cultural aspect of my identity is like a vulnerable side to me because that connects to
Yeah,
a lot of it connects to a lot of things for us. It's not just culture. When you think about being Indian, it's like family because in our culture, family is such an important pillar. It's about like the relationships that you have, the way that you kind of go about your philosophy and your mentality. So I totally,
mhm.
I feel the same way too. Like I get so scared talking about myself in that aspect because it is a vulnerable side to us. Ironically, we did a value and vulnerability episode like what 2 weeks ago, but still,
Yeah,
it's
yeah. We were all like, let's be vulnerable, and then now
we
we're
got
like
this.
vulnerable with some conditions, depending on
Exactly.
the person. Yeah,
We're working on it. We're working on it. I feel like
yeah,
just like the dating world is just a little bit more intimidating than social interactions because you're meant to be vulnerable in the dating world because you're making a relationship that you could potentially like have a deeper meaning and stuff like that in the future. But anyways, epiphany aside,
yeah, yeah,
personally, I think the biggest thing that internalized racism affects, and just personally for me in the dating world, is just like, will people be interested in me? As weird as that might sound weird, but like, I
yeah,
don't know. There's like growing up, always the ideal versions of someone would was not an image of me. It was always obviously everybody knows what that image is, like with the Eurocentric beauty standards. But then I also felt that same type of pressure even within like guys in our own community, like South Asian guys. Like there's a specific type of look that they go for, even if you are South Asian. And of course, I don't fit that. But so I always just felt like, do people really like me? Or like whenever like I go on dates, or if I'm ever like whenever something is gonna happen, I'm just like, do they really like me? Because it's like that doubt or that second guessing because the ideal views or ideal like what majority of people like is just kind of the opposite. But
yeah.
yeah.
What people see is like, I okay, I also kind of segueing from that, the whole idea of like, oh, you're Indian, so do you only date Indian guys, do you only
Oh my
date
god.
non-Indian guys? I hate that question because I'm like, guys, I legitimately look for personality, like I really do. Like I want to say that, but I know it comes off as super cheesy and like people don't believe me when I say it, and I'm like, guys, I like really don't care. I
So like
don't care. But then
what's your ideal type then?
I hell fine. Someone who makes me laugh and I'm comfortable with, like
Mm-hmm.
guys, like I just want someone who's like nice to me and like I can, be nice to them and we're having a good camaraderie. Like I don't understand like why it has to be anything more than that. Like I hate that like stigma, like, oh, like are you into Indian guys? Like, sure. If they like my personality, like my tolerance for people is very low. I don't think you understand. There's only certain people in the world that I actually do get along with. So when I do find that connection, like race and stuff, I don't really want to think about it.
Right.
Like I that can't be a filter that I put on my dating life because like it's just not going to work for me. Like I'm never going to find that person. I don't
Right.
know. You
No, no,
know?
I get that because the reason why I wanted to ask what your ideal type is, people always ask me that, and then they assume, oh, like I just assumed you would say what like an ideal type of being like Indian and this and this and
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like,
Like looks
no,
at yeah, no.
yeah, like for me, like I'm similar as like for me, my ideal type is someone who's emotionally intelligent. Like that's like my
Mhm.
number one factor. I don't care how old you are, how young you are, what race you are, or like even if you come with like kids. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
Like and, like those weird like those stigmas or taboos that come with the dating scene, or like of not dating your age or whatever. Like I don't care about that stuff because those are like so superficial at the end of the day. But like coming to that though, people like whenever I say that, people are like, "Well, you've never really like dated an Indian guy,"
Ugh. Yeah.
and I'm just like, I okay, one I have, I just don't tell you. Two, like
For
I don't
your
know.
information.
Yeah, I was like, but like two, but like also I don't know. This might be bad to say. I'm like been debating in my head to say it out on like our
Mm,
podcast, but
okay.
um, I don't know. Just it is really bad because this is stereotyping at a level, but I feel like South Asian guys, our age, what we're 22, right? Like this era of South Asian guys, like they're not grown enough for the expectations of like my ideal type. So it just happens to be that I don't really gravitate towards them because I don't connect to them. Like I feel like a lot of girls, a lot of women can relate to this in terms of our age. Like South Asian guys still need to kind of grow up in this age. I kind of actually put that filter in myself after having a few experiences in the past. But like I feel like beyond maybe 30, maybe if I'm 30 and I'm still single, I would maybe then consider South Asian guys just because it doesn't fit my ideal type as a person. But people, whenever I say that, they're like, oh, so you just don't want to be with an Indian guy, like you just don't
It's
want
like,
an Indian man.
no.
I'm like, it's not race at the end of the day. It's just I don't know. I don't know.
I just, in my experience, I've had dates with Indian guys and they just don't seem like they're at the same level that I'm at emotionally. Like, I just don't
Right.
want to have to deal with that on a dating level. Like, sorry. Like, it's not about the, like, I don't know. Yeah, no, I
And
see where you're coming from. I do understand that.
yeah, but like it's also like just because I don't want to date an Indian guy, that doesn't mean that I am less Indian. You know, like that's where the
Yeah.
internalized racism concept I feel like comes in. And I think Rugini in our
Hmm.
interracial relationships episode said a very same thing. She's like people have questioned oftentimes like if I'm Indian enough because I married a white guy, and that's just the same thing. I think just that expectation for women to marry within their same race is kind of another like it's another pressure for us in terms of that internalized racism like pressures.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, and I was gonna say, like, I think also what, like, I think the question that immediately pops up in someone's head when I say, like, oh, I don't really care who they are, I think their immediate question is like, but what about your parents? Are they okay with that? Are
Oh
they
my
cool with
gosh,
that?
yes.
And I'm like, I will deal with that as it comes. Like, I'm not gonna, first of all, I'm not gonna drop, I'm not, I, mm, the way that I describe my dating life to my parents and the consensus we've come to is that if it's something serious, please tell us. That's like the only rule that we have right now. If it's going to be a serious thing and it's going to be a relationship, it's going to be someone that is going to be in your life for a long period of time, and you feel like you need to tell us, tell us. Please tell us. We want to know. But otherwise, like, up to you. That's like, but that's again, we came to that consensus after talking about it a couple of times, you know? Like, we've set that boundary for ourselves, me and my parents. But again, having said that, what's it to you to have to ask me or think like, oh, what about your parents? Like, it's not your problem. I've talked to my parents. I know where we stand, and I'm happy where we're at, you know? And
Right.
I don't know.
I totally get that. Like I've had similar conversations with my parents. They're like they say the same thing too. They're like, Kirti, why are you like there's no like let's not talk about hypothetical scenarios, let's talk about when it actually happens. And that makes
Yeah,
sense. And
yeah.
I feel like if you put so many filters at the very beginning before even getting to know a person, you're not really gonna find that person that you're looking for. Like
Yeah.
I think that's such a big pressure in our community, though. Whenever I talk to my friends, they're like, "Oh, I really like talking to this guy. He makes me feel really happy, but he's not Indian, so my parents are not going to expect. Like, my parents are not going to accept. My family's not going to accept. Is it really worth going through all that trouble to potentially see that this guy might be the fit for me?" I'm like, well, first judge the guy first and go through all the steps if you to see if he's actually worth fighting for with your family. And then two, also you never
Mhm.
had that conversation with your parents. You just assumed that they're like, oh, you need to marry an Indian guy or like maybe a guy in India. Specific, like some people are like more specific. An Indian guy that speaks the same language, has the same religion
Mhm.
background, same. Some people even like caste and stuff like that. Like, don't get ahead of yourself. You just met the guy. Like, I think those pressures are a little too much, and sometimes the pressure you could be like I've done it too. Like I assumed that it's a pressure, but in reality it's not. And then I talk to my parents. They're like, "Yo, Kirti, why are you thinking this hard?" I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
you really don't care?
Oh,
Okay, sweet." Like,
cool.
yeah.
I mean, I think that whole like kind of thought process too is just like a product of like being a hyphenated identity in general too, because it can't just be our community that does this where we go on the first date and like and not even like just generally across the board, no
Hmm.
matter what race you are. I think everyone is like has, especially in the beginning stages of dating life, like you're already thinking about, oh, like okay, so I really
What's
like this
next?
person. What's next? How's this gonna end? You
Yep.
know, like I think that's just a product of like being a person in this time and dating scene that we live in right now with the whole like online dating and like all that stuff. Like people are swiping, but it's such a menial thing that like it's so easy to just be like, oh, it'll be, I can wait for the next one. There'll always be a next one.
Oh my
You know,
gosh, yes.
like there's not enough like there's not enough substance. Like it's so hard to meet someone outside of the on like online dating stuff that like we're so used to just swiping and swiping and swiping and swiping that like is that really like I question whether that's just like marking people off without really giving them a chance.
Hmm.
And that's just, I feel like we're making that box that we already put ourselves in tighter and tighter and tighter.
We're all
We're
gonna be
like making it
contortionists by
hard.
the end.
Yeah. We're like
Like,
making this so hard for ourselves. Like can we just like I don't know. Like I don't know. It's just the way that social media and everything has taken place. It's just it is what it is and it sucks. But
no, I
I don't
totally
know.
get that. I don't know if this is a different, like, this should be for a different episode, but like online dating apps and like the hookup culture, like the priorities is also something that's a factor in my opinion. So like the hookup culture that I cannot be a part of. It's just not me. But like that also I feel like is a play. But that'll be a different episode. I'm getting ahead of myself. Like me toast.
We're running low on time. We should move on from
Yeah,
dating. Honestly, maybe we should just have another episode about dating later
yeah.
because I
People
would
let
be
us know.
down.
Yeah, let us know, people, if you want to hear about our concepts or ideal views in dating and relationships. Because yeah, I feel like we should do an episode on that. Okay.
I think it'd be fun. I think it'd be fun. We'll do one. We'll do one.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Anyways, okay, moving on to the last question because we got to get through it. How do we as individuals start to overcome internalized racism in terms of like ourselves, like internally, and also like the community? How do you think the community as a whole can externally start, you know, minimizing the effects of internalized racism?
It's a great question.
Thank you.
So I love how we always talk about how we can change things at the end of an episode. Cause I feel like a lot of times it gets very negative or pessimistic, and so I think it's really important to think about change. So I'm glad we always have like a last question like that. Um, but in terms of like individual, something I'm also kind of working on is I think just trying not to judge a person right when you meet them, right? Like I hate the saying that's in the corporate world, like first impressions are the most important thing in the world, because you never know what's going on in that person's like life beyond like that first impression. Maybe that day that you met them, something is they had an argument with their like their partner, or someone just like has experienced something that's so bad, but they still had to keep a smile on their face because they're networking or having to give a good first impression. So I think just being kinder to others and not judging off of like small actions is super important in terms of like walking or going away from like internalized racism. And I think as a community, just following that and encouraging that is something that will be very helpful. There's this one manager of mine said, I think he was just I don't know if it was just like how it was worded. It just was really weirdly settling in me. It's just like people sometimes you guys are a little too successful, and sometimes you need to fail to make mistakes. Like he was just giving general advice, and I like didn't really like that advice because no one can be too successful without failure. Like failure is the reason why you succeed. So you
Yeah.
just don't automatically assume if someone is high achieving that everything is flowers and roses and pretty, and basically was kind of escalated to the level they are now. So I think that type of mindset and just kind of being empathetic and understanding that there could be more to a story than what you're seeing is, I think, very important.
I think I think also just like calling each other out. in certain
Oh yeah.
situations. Like, for example, like self-deprecating jokes about culture and identity. Like, I mean, hell, I've gotten called out for some of the stuff that I say sometimes, like especially very early, like early college days. Like, like I would say some things, and these weren't even Indian people that were calling me out. They were like American people, not American, like like they were like not part of the Indian community, and they were calling me out on this stuff, and that made me realize like, oh hey, like yeah, you're right. Like, why am I doing that? I don't know. I've just learned that that will get me a laugh, like I just know that that type of joke will get me a laugh, and that's it's just been internally in me for so long. But you calling it out, it really helped, because now I'm like, oh okay, good. Don't have I should probably not. I can be more creative than that, you know
Hmm.
um but yeah, like so calling each other out, and also like not laughing at those jokes. Just, you don't even have to
Right.
say anything, don't laugh. Like, if you don't find it funny, don't laugh. I think that goes says a lot. And
Hmm.
again, I should probably be giving credit to that advice to one of my friends. That was an advice that I pulled from another friend, but
Shout out
kudos
to
to her
Stan's
for
friend.
shout out to her for giving me that one, because I was telling her about something else, and how um I don't know, I was just telling her about all the stuff, like a comment that was made at me or something, and I was like, oh, it makes me really uncomfortable, but I don't want to call them out on it because that feels weird too. And she was just like, don't laugh, don't do it, next time it happens, don't laugh. And I'm like, okay, okay. And that felt good. I was like, okay, that's like cool, because again, keeping each other accountable, and uplifting, as opposed to highlighting the stuff that we shouldn't be highlighting, like stopping the
Hmm.
transference from happening before it happens.
Right.
I think it's very important. I don't know.
Very well said.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I think that was with that. This has been a great conversation. I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that before we conclude, Kirti, but if you're
No,
not,
I think you
you're
ended it
good.
very well.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for our listeners for sticking to this conversation from beginning to end. We always love and appreciate that you guys do this for us, and we're always very happy to like share our thoughts on this kind of stuff. And yeah, so check out the link in our description for our website, Kirti. And I'm always trying to like plug our website, because we do. Kirti put it together, and it's been great and it's awesome. And check it out. Check out our the YouTube link with our videos that are uncut, which are really great. We started doing that season 3. And yeah, share, like, repost. I don't know.
Spread the
It's been
love,
great.
man.
Yeah. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one.
Yeah, stay safe, everybody. So before you kind of leave us today, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Ravi Ray Audio. You might have heard that our intro and outro music is a little bit different this season and is definitely upgraded to a next level. That's all thanks to Ravi Ray, who was our last guest in season 2, and he agreed to help us out with our music for season 3. So thank you so much, Ravi Ray, for all your help. And if you guys want to get in contact with him to collaborate with any projects or work with Ravi Ray Audio, we are linking his information to the episode description, so you can reach out to him or see all the other projects he's done. And thanks again, Ravi, and we'll see you guys all in the next one.